The highly competitive and crucial race for U.S. Senate in Ohio. Ahead on Face the State. Longtime Ohio Senator, Democrat Sherrod Brown is locked in a battle with Trump-endorsed Republican businessman Bernie Moreno in one of the key races that could determine the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. As the race heats up and Election Day draws closer, TV, radio, and internet platforms are flooded with campaign ads for and against each candidate. But where do they stand on the things that matter to you? Today, one-on-one with Senator Brown on the big issues. Good morning, I'm Doug Petcash. Thanks for joining us for Face the State. Election Day, November 5th, is now just a little more than 2 months away. Early voting starts on October 8th. Ohio has one of the most closely watched races in the country, the race for U.S. Senate between incumbent Democrat Sherrod Brown and his opponent, Republican Bernie Moreno. We want to focus on the issues in this race. I've been in contact with Bernie Moreno's campaign about having him on this program, as he was before the primary, to discuss his stances on the key issues. I'm waiting to hear back. Now, I did sit down with Senator Brown this past week as he runs for a fourth term in the U.S. Senate. We talked about the economy, abortion, the southern border, and the conflicts between Ukraine and Russia and Israel and Hamas. I started by asking him what he sees as the most important issue that needs to be addressed to help Ohioans.
Politics is really whose side you're on. It's not sort of a left or right spectrum, liberal, conservative. It's who you're fighting for. And too often the federal government and state government have stood on the side of special interest. And my job is to stand up, whether it's to the drug companies, to the railroads in East Palestine, to Wall Street, because when you see, the wealthy are getting wealthier in this country and the middle class shrinking, and people that get up and work every day and work hard every day don't have enough to show for it. It's because of special interest politics in government. And my job will always be to stand up for Ohioans. And I look at the job as not as Democrat or Republican, not as Trump or Biden or now Harris or Obama. I look at it as who's doing the right things for Ohio. And that's why I have disagreed with presidents of both parties on trade, or why I've stood up to presidents of both parties on the border, that we've got to do better, and that means looking out first and foremost for Ohio voters.
As chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, what should be done to help lower those costs of living right now that we're seeing the high costs of things like groceries and housing?
One of the things we've been able to do is, and this took far too many years, is to put a cap on insulin prices. Now that I met a guy yesterday who still pays $200 for insulin. He's not Medicare eligible yet. And he about $200 a month, and we have been able to cap insulin prices for Medicare beneficiaries at $35 a month. And that's a big part. That's a huge cost for an increasing number of people in this country. And I want to extend that in my next term to everybody, not just people
to
in Medicare.
Make it universal.
To make it universal. And the drug companies rarely lose, just like Norfolk Southern rarely loses on this fight in East Palestine, just like Wall Street rarely loses. And I think the contrast between my opponent and me is he always is on the side of those special interests. I stand up to him, and we've had victories on fixing pensions for 100,000 workers in this state. 100,000 workers were going to lose half their pensions. We fixed that. What we're able to named after the bills named after Ohio, we were able to fix the veterans, soldiers, and Marines who are exposed to those football field-sized burn pits. We're able to make sure they get health care. That bill's named after Ohio and Central Ohio from Pickerington, Heath Robinson. So it's really standing up for Ohioans against these special interests.
What should the Fed do about inflation?
Well, the Fed should bring interest rates down. Clearly, I've asked the chair. I know the chair. He's, the banking committee that I chair oversees the Federal Reserve. We've pushed him in hearings. I've talked to him privately the importance of moving faster and bringing interest rates down. People are paying too much. It's hurt small business. People are paying too much for home mortgages. Just a gentleman I was just talking to in my staff bought his house just before these interest rates went up. He was lucky, but they went up for so many people, and it's made the housing it's made it more difficult for particularly young people, but anybody to be able to get into the housing market. And we know that to buy that first house can help to set you for life, and that you then have some amount of wealth that you can build and ultimately pass on to your kids.
Well, speaking of that, Vice President Harris recently came out in support of a $25,000 federal assistance for down payments for for first-time home buyers. I guess President Biden's proposal was $10,000. Where do you stand on that?
I appreciate that she's interested in it, that she focuses already on the dignity of work and on housing. I would hope that any president would do that. I've endorsed Vice President Harris. But I think that what we're trying to do, and I can talk more practically, is we're working on legislation that provides to help, that doesn't give a subsidy, it helps them advance on the down payment. So right now in this country, many veterans can buy a house without the in many cases, the down payment that says they can't get in the market, but it rolls the down payment into later payments. So a lot of veterans are in homes now because of that. I have a bill to extend that to police, fire, and teachers. I would like to widen that so that to create the opportunity of more people buying home, getting to be able to buy homes. And I'm concerned about a subsidy. Just does that mean house prices go up? I want to help with that down payment and figure out the best way to do this.
Because you worry that actually could.
Yeah, people say that. I don't know. I should have answered the question at the beginning this way. I want to try to look at every option. Housing is too expensive. Too many people can't get homes. Too many young people think they're never going to be able to buy a home because of, frankly, in part because of government policies, presidents of both parties for the last decade, last couple of decades. So, I look at what we did in this country with the GI Bill and what we've done a number of times to get people able to get an education, get people able to buy a home. And when I say education, I don't mean just four-year colleges. I also mean Columbus State, or I also mean trade school.
Where do you stand on student loan forgiveness?
Yeah, I want to help. First of all, the most important thing is to bring college costs down. And I see what's happened on a number of schools. Bluffton College is now merging with the University of Findlay, not in this media market, but up in Northwest Ohio. We're seeing too many colleges struggle financially. We're seeing too many kids struggle financially. I would like to see those debt wiped away. I think we need to do that in as many cases as we can. But I think you also look at the other end, why college is too expensive, and giving people a path. Too much emphasis in this society of you got to go to college, you got to go to college, you got to go to college. And for many people, it was that way for me. I assume you're sitting there like this, it was that way for you. But it's not the best thing, nor does every kid. Half the adults in this state didn't go to college or don't have college degrees, and sometimes that's choice, sometimes it's cost. We need to deal with the cost, but we need to give people opportunity, like building futures, giving those kids a chance to make a decent living. I mean, to me, when I talk about the dignity of work, it always means that you should be, whether you swipe a badge or punch a clock or work for tips or work in an office or work on a salary, you ought to be rewarded. Your hard work should be rewarded, that you get a chance to get ahead. Too many cases in this country, it isn't.
You've been known to be hard on international trade. Do you believe America should do more when it comes to tariffs? We've heard former President Trump talk about increasing tariffs on Chinese goods.
I don't think it's an across-the-board approach that's the best thing. And I've stood up to presidents of my own party on trade issues forever, and I think presidents of both parties have failed the American public. I spent early in my career fighting Bill Clinton on NAFTA. I think it was a terrible thing for our state. And I fought George Bush on the next round, something called the Central American Free Trade Agreement, because they both were wrong. I think that we finally in this country now have what I've been advocating for, an industrial policy where we find ways to bring American manufacturing back to this country. It will only work if we enforce trade agreements. And I've had some differences with the Biden administration, asking them to strengthen some of the enforcement on solar panels, on steel. We are bringing back, because we've done it right now, 600 jobs and actually it's Weirton in West Virginia. A lot of Ohioans in eastern Ohio will benefit from this. We have the largest solar manufacturer in North America, First Solar. I've worked with them. They're up near Toledo. I've worked with them to make sure that China can't, because they pay very low wages and ignore environmental laws, that China can't undercut their solar panels, because China can almost always produce something more cheaply because they don't pay their workers much, and sometimes slave labor, child labor, and because they don't follow worker safety and environmental laws. We should never compromise on our worker safety laws. Our environmental laws are here for a reason, and have made our quality of life better, and I want to keep those strong.
Ohio has attracted some big companies, obviously with Intel in Licking County, Google, Amazon. What should be done to continue this trend of Ohio being attractive to larger businesses, to continue economic growth in Central Ohio?
Well, what we should have, we should be a state that's welcoming. Part of this is what economic incentives you put together, but we were talking, I guess I can disclose what we were talking about when we were walking in, that you like this city because you like the quality of life here. And the quality of life in Columbus I don't think there's any place better than the quality of life in Ohio. I worry, though, about what this state's doing on undermining public education. I worry about what this state was doing on a number of other issues that make it a little less attractive. I'll leave it at that. But I think that we're doing some of the right things here, but I want to see our kids. We still have far too many kids leaving, young people leaving. I ask people all the time that are 50 and up, are your kids still here? And too many of them say no, and I think that we've got to do a lot better on that if we're going to attract these bigger companies.
Your opponent blames the Biden-Harris administration and you, basically, for the situation at the southern border, criminals being allowed in to commit more crimes here, according to some of their ads. How do you respond to that criticism?
Well, I'm not going to answer every negative ad, but again, make the contrast. I voted for the strongest border bill, bipartisan border bill endorsed by the Border Patrol union, and they're not a union that supports Democrats very often. They support this bill. My opponent opposed it. We should move decisively, quickly in that. And the other part of that is fentanyl. And I wrote with a Republican ranking member, it's called the senior Republican on my committee that I chair, the fentanyl bill, to go after the money. It goes after the precursor chemical makers in China, in communist China. It goes after the cartels in Mexico that make this stuff. We got to keep this stuff out. You go after the money. You make this a whole lot less profitable. You go after their bank accounts. You freeze their assets. You use the tools of our federal government to keep this stuff out of the country. You got to do more, too. You got to support the police and having detection equipment. You've got to have more detection equipment at the border. You've got to make sure our police have Narcan, that our police have the protective equipment handling this stuff. It's a really all-the-above approach, but my bill, the most important is keeping this stuff out. My bill passed. It's now law. Federal agents are working on this.
Does the bipartisan border security bill have any chance of passing, no matter who wins the presidential race?
I think it has a great chance to passage. Kamala Harris at the convention said if she's elected, she's going to immediately work on that. I think Trump probably would work on it too. He's opposed to it now because he basically said, kill the bill. I want to use this as a political issue. I think Trump's still for the bill. So next year, I think regardless of the winner, we have a real chance.
Where do you stand on the numbers of people that are coming across the border and what should be done with them if they don't have the documentation to come in here through the system?
Yeah, if people have proper documentation, you keep them here. You help them. They're working. If they have the proper documentation, they're working. We've always been that country. That's the most important thing to do. If someone commits a crime and is here, if someone commits a crime, period, whether they're an immigrant or one of us, the government should take action, the local courts. And if they're here illegally, they commit a crime, they should be deported, clearly.
What if they're here illegally, period?
Well, we've got to work that through. And this bill this strongest border bill we've ever had in front of us, again, supported by the Border Patrol, would help to take care of that. But we need to be serious. And my opponent's playing politics with it, of course. I mean, that's the ads he runs. That's the ads all over the country. They think there's political benefit there, but I think voters want a solution, and those ads aren't a solution. A solution is the bill we've tried to pass. And, it's on everything. I mean, there's this contrast. I mean, my opponent is for a national abortion ban. even though Ohioans 57% voted that they wanted reproductive rights in the Constitution here. So all of these contrasts on every issue are pretty clear.
Do you expect or do you believe that there's still momentum for a national ban on abortion, despite former President Trump basically saying, hey, it's now a state's issue since Roe v. Wade was overturned? And, I think abortion was mentioned one time in the Republican platform going into the RNC. Are you concerned that there is still momentum to have something like that pushed through?
Oh, I think Ohioans don't trust when they hear a politician say, "Oh, we're going to take care of this," when this state had basically an entire essentially an abortion ban, period. And I think most people in Ohio know that if they can get away with that, they'll do it again because they're listening to their special interest friend. That's what's important about our constitutional amendment in Ohio. That's what's important when you go to vote this year. Look at who's on your side on abortion. And I think women particularly, but I think generally people in Ohio don't want government making this decision. They want their doctor, the woman and her family, if she chooses, and the doctor to make this decision, not politicians. And it's clear from all the dancing and moving and all the things that my opponent's doing and others, that they're still playing games with abortion. They're trying to find out, what do I say that gets me past this? But the fact is, I think most people don't trust them on this issue because they believe that my opponent wants the government to make these decisions.
Senator Brown's opponent, Bernie Moreno, has told me he supports a ban on abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy with common sense restrictions after that time period. But he also said now that the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, it is predominantly a state issue. Still ahead on Face the State, Senator Brown on supporting Ukraine in its war with Russia and his stance on the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Now back to my interview with Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown as he seeks a fourth term in the U.S. Senate. We turn to foreign policy. First, whether the U.S. should continue sending military aid indefinitely to help Ukraine defend itself from the Russian invasion.
Think about how this plays out. If they overrun Ukraine, then they're right up to NATO's border. And our commitment to NATO, through NATO, is if a NATO country's attacked, we send troops. That's our commitment. It's been our commitment for 80 years, 75, 1946, whatever, how many years. It's our commitment, and we live by it. That's why we're not sending soldiers to Ukraine. We're sending dollars. We're sending weapons, not dollars. And the weapons, some of those weapons are made in Lima, Ohio. So these are a lot of American jobs.
The tanks, right?
Yeah, the tanks. Yeah. I don't make the decision based on American jobs, but I do make the decision based on our ally, Ukraine, and keeping Russia from overrunning Ukraine and being up against the border. Because imagine if all of a sudden they attack Poland because they've overrun Ukraine, or they attack Lithuania, or they attack Slovakia, or they attack the Czech Republic, or they attack Hungary. Those are NATO countries. What happens then? The American people want to send troops in perhaps the biggest land war. This is a big land war in Europe, the biggest land war since World War II. I don't think so. This is a low cost to pay. I know the demagoguery and the talking points of my opponent and others is we shouldn't send all this money to Ukraine, but we're mostly sending our weapons, protecting them. They're fighting for themselves. They're fighting for their lives. I don't want Russia to come into Central Europe and do the damage it would do.
What do you think needs to happen now in Israel between Israeli forces and Hamas, as well as also the humanitarian situation that you're seeing playing out in Gaza?
Yeah, of course, as I've said since October, I guess probably before October, that Israel has the right to defend itself, whether it's Hamas or whether it's Hezbollah in the north. But and we've stood there and will continue to stand there. But we need an agreement. We need an agreement with a ceasefire, with the hostages returned, and letting in the humanitarian aid in Gaza. It's horrible how many people have died in Gaza who were innocent. It's horrible what happened, first of all, to those innocent people in Israel on October 7th, and then those that have been taken hostage. Surely some have died. I mean, we know that. But we've got to negotiate this agreement with Israel, with the United States being the broker, and Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization, no question, but look at the damage they've done and look at what's happened since.
With the surge we've seen for Kamala Harris since she took over at the top of the ticket, How helpful is that, do you think? And also, how do you view President Biden's decision to step aside for her to take?
Yeah, I was one of 4 Democrats to ask President Biden to step aside. It was a hard call. I felt bad, really, because I like him personally. I like many of the things he's done, but I thought that it was time, and I've seen this excitement for Vice President Harris. I'm encouraged that she talks a lot about the dignity of work. And so I've seen a lot of, particularly among young voters, and young voters are always a challenge to get to the polls. Young voters are less tuned in than older voters because older voters see the role of government in their lives. Younger voters might not as much, and they're busy with other things. So it's always a challenge to get young people out to vote. It will be less of a challenge with Kamala Harris on the ticket.
How do you feel about the ticket?
I feel good. I like both of them. I like the fact that I've endorsed, as we've said, I like the fact that there's a Midwestern with Midwestern values that understands the challenges that Ohio has that other states might not have, that former President Trump's home state of New York has a different set of challenges than Ohio does. And so I always look at things through the lens of what we do in Ohio and what's best for Ohioans.
And again, I've been in contact with Bernie Moreno's campaign about having him on Face the State to discuss his stances on the key issues, and I'm waiting to hear back. Next on Face the State, possible property tax relief through an income tax rebate, how it would work and who it would help. Now to an effort to give Ohio homeowners and renters some tax relief as high property taxes keep going up. Bipartisan bills in the Ohio House and Senate would give eligible homeowners an income tax credit or rebate if their property taxes are more than 5% of their income. It would also apply to renters for the portion of their rent attributable to property taxes. The primary sponsors of the House version say Ohio needs property tax relief now.
Our property taxes are way too high for way too many people.
That's why Democratic State Representative Dunny Isaacson introduced House Bill 645 along with Republican Representative Thomas Hall. Isaacson says the measure could potentially help hundreds of thousands of Ohioans.
Not only are property tax payers, homeowners, getting relief, but also when landlords are passing on the increases to their renters, that their tenants are also getting some relief.
The bill would provide an income tax credit or rebate for homeowners and renters whose property taxes or a portion of their rent are more than 5% of their income. A household making $60,000 or less would be eligible for a credit or rebate up to $1,000. The amount of relief falls as income increases. A household at the highest eligible income level of $100,000 would get a credit or rebate of $200. The Senate companion bill differs in that it would provide credits only for households making up to $60K.
Any action or activity that the General Assembly can take that is going to allow people to be able to maintain and stay in the neighborhood they want, we're very supportive.
Franklin County Auditor Michael Stinziano oversees the county's property tax assistance program. It provides one-time payments for seniors and those with disabilities struggling to pay property taxes.
We continue to hear that kitchen table issue of not wanting to be property taxed out of their neighborhood.
Representative Isaacson says other states already have similar tax relief measures in place. He says this bill is based on a law in Michigan.
People were being taxed out of their homes yesterday, today, tomorrow. And so we are trying to do more on this issue.
Isaacson says seniors on fixed incomes are most impacted by rising property taxes, and many more would qualify for help under this bill if it passes. Thanks for joining me this week for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. I'll see you next Sunday at 11:30.